Welcome, and in this video in the QPSMR Insight Up and Running series, we're going to look at the subject of target weighting. Now, first thing to say about target weighting in QPS, this is one feature in the QPSMR companion that is much more powerful and much easier to use than you'll find in QPSMR Insight. There's also a lot more flexibility and a lot more testing available to check that your weighting is relevant and is not affecting the effective sample size too much. You'll also find if you have rim weighting, you'll definitely need to use the QPSMR companion for that, unless you use a free utility that's available from MRDC, which will calculate rim weights for you in Excel so that you can input the factors from MRDCL so that you can input the factors manually. Alright, so we're going to look at a questionnaire here. We've got just the 4 questions on this questionnaire: gender, region, age, and question 1, which is whether they buy Wizzo chocolate bars. And we're going to use the gender, region and age to do the weighting, or set targets for weighting. Now let's say first of all we want to weight gender. So let's just do a quick table first to see what we've got in this data. So if we run question 1 by each of these 3 questions very quickly, we can see that in the sample we've got 33 males from 50 respondents and 17 females. Now let's say, for the sake of argument, what we want here, we just want to weight the data so we get the same number of males as females. In other words, give males a target of 25 and females also a target of 25. Alright, let's look at how we do that. So let's close this temporarily and let's go to the folder where our project is stored. So this is the name of the QDF, weighting_data.qrf, and to weight to gender I would need to make a weighting file. Now you can use any editor for this. I'm going to use a piece of software called WinVi to make this file, but you could use Notepad or any word processor. The important thing about this file is it has a WGT file extension. Now some editors force you to have, when you make a text file, to have a TXT file extension, which may mean you need to rename it in Explorer to have the correct extension. So I'm going to make a file here called weighting _data. I'm going to give it a WGDT file extension, and it must have that file extension. Alright, I'm now going to open that in my editor. Let's say it could be Notepad, and if I want to weight to gender, I would specify that as the question. It could be a variable as well. It needn't be a question. It could be a variable that you're weighting to. And in here on the second line, I'm going to put my targets, which are 25 and 25. And that's all I need to do. That's going to tell QPS that gender is the question or variable that I'm weighting to, and I want 25 respondents for both males and females. Now, if you've got your targets as percentages, in QPSMR Insight, you will need to actually work out what that percentage represents. So if I had 50% males and 50% females, given my sample size is 50 here, I would need to convert that or calculate that as 25 males and 25 females. Again, in Companion, you can use percentages and it will work out what that figure is automatically for you. Alright, so let's save that. And now let's go back to QPS and let's run a table. And let's run question 1 by gender and run it. And what will happen now is you can see a message pops up asking you whether you want to weight the questionnaire to targets or not. If you say no, of course you'll just get unweighted figures. If I click yes, you can see what's happened now is that I've got question 1 analysed by female, but it's got the unweighted base of 33 and 17, but actually the data is now weighted so that it's weighted to 25 males and 25 females. And of course the figures down here have adjusted accordingly. Alright, so that's when you want to weight to one target. Let's now look at weighting to two targets. Let's say we want to weight to gender by region. And if we look at the region question, we can see we've got two regions here, north and south. Just quickly look at the question. There they are, north and south. So let's say we want to weight to gender within region. So I'll go back to my file. I can open this again in my editor. And this time I'm going to put region on the line. And let's say for my 50 respondents, I want, let's go for 20 males in the north. Let's go for 10 males in the south. And then for the females, I want 20 in the north and 10, and too many there, let's go 10 and 10. So now, when you say gender by region, what you can think of, or you can construct is, or in your head, is that you've got gender down the left-hand side and region across the top. And the figures that you're putting in are going across the page. So that's 20 males within the first region, 10 males within the second region, and then on the next line we get to the females, 10 in the first region and 10 in the second region. Now if we run that, we can just, again, click question 1, pick the columns, and let's pick region and gender this time. Click OK, weight the tables, and we can now see that we've got 30 males and 20 females, and in the north we've got 30 people and 20 in the south. And indeed, if we ran a cross tab of, let's pick gender by region, weight that, we can see we've got the 20 males here, the 10 here, the 10 here, and the 10 here, which are given those totals of 30 and 20 that we saw in the previous table. Alright, so we're going to move on now to 3 levels of weighting, or 3 variables being used, or questions being used in weighting: gender, region and age. So let's open up our file again. So now for weighting to these cells, I'm going to weight to 12 different cells, and they've got to add to 50. So I hope I get this right. So we're going to input 4, 4 and 4 here. So that's the weighting the males within region 1, the north, by the 3 age categories. Now we're going to do the males in the second region by the 3 age categories. So I'm going to go 4, 4 and 4 again. And I'm going to go 4, 4, 4 for the females within region 1 for the 3 age categories. And I'm going to go for 5, 5 and 4 here, which means it should hopefully add up to 50. Let's go back to our project. Now what I put in here actually is another way of doing this. I've actually put a variable in for checking purposes called gender region, which is gender within region. I could have used that as that variable as the rows in my table and made it two-dimensional. So let's quickly go into quick tables. Let's pick gender region by age and run that, weight the data, and sure enough you can see I've got 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 5, 5 and 4, and the weighted bases are coming out under the age. I could show the unweighted bases for other parts of the table as well, but that looks to me as though the weighting has worked perfectly well there. And we could, if you like, look at question 1 now and look at how that looks against age, for example. Choose our weighting, and we can see that question 1 is weighted by those 3 levels of ranking, or 3 questions are being used for ranking, and we get the weighted bases across here. And we can also get unweighted figures in this table if we want to as well. There's a format option that allows you to do that. So that's done three variables being used for weighting. You can extend that to 4 and 5 up to 10 variables, and each time that you add a variable you can think of the rows being within each other. So if you went from 4 you would have A by B by C as the rows, and the rows that you would put into your WGT file by the columns from the fourth one. So you have to think of how that matrix, if you like, will get exploded out. It's also worth saying a few things here about the variables that are being used. If we go back to our variables here, one thing that can trip you up is that you can see here gender has got 2 responses. If you were to put a not stated on the end there and use the variable or the question gender for your weighting, if it had a not stated, you would need to have a third set of figures that you were weighting to for the not stated. It must match exactly in the WGT file the number of responses that you've got for each question or variable that you use in your weighting procedure. And that could be you can get around that if you like by putting zeros in for the not stated if you want to exclude them from your sample, or you could make a variable called gender that just picked up males and females, but nonetheless you would need to address that if that was something that was present in your questions or variables that you were using. Now the other thing to say is if you want to use rim weighting, the QPSMR Companion is probably the better tool for that. It does have some nice tools in it, the Companion, for weighting to percentages, for doing rim weighting for you, and it gives you a lot more flexibility and does a lot more checks on the effectiveness of your weighting procedures that you're putting in place. QPSMR Insight just basically takes what you give it and runs it. So that completes this video on target weighting in QPSMR Insight. As ever, if you're ever doing any weighting, it's always good to be cautious and check that the weights that are being applied to each record are within reasonable bounds and you're not weighting some cells to very large numbers or very small numbers. There are some more things that we can help you with here. We do have a free rim weighting calculator so that you can input manually the factors that should be applied to achieve rim weighting targets. But of course, as I said, the QPSMR Companion is probably the better tool for that. It does it more automatically for you. And you'll find some blog articles on our website that refer to weighting and how you need to be cautious sometimes with applying target or rim weighting. I hope this video was helpful. There's obviously several more videos in the QPSMR Insight Up and Running series that you can follow on other subjects.